And the way that market works is that generally the compliance departments would rather, they just want to have plausible deniability. Like, yeah, I'm meeting the letter of the law, and if something actually happens with insider trading and they miss it, as long as they can prove that they weren't negligent, that's good enough. So when a technological solution comes out that might, raise the bar on what companies can do, they're like, maybe I have to buy this or I'm going to be negligent.
The Adversarial Podcast. Why you gotta be so adversarial? It's time to get adversarial.
Welcome back to the Adversarial Podcast. Great to see you guys. We're just about into February and a lot of things queued up here. Before we jump into it, what are you guys up to? Anything new? Any major life changes or travel going on right now? Mario, what do you got?
I'm staying home so far. So looking forward to February being a calm and relaxing month without travels.
Well, I left for Tel Aviv before snowfall started falling, and I was advised to leave Tel Aviv before missiles started falling. So I'm back
so you've
home.
already been to Tel Aviv and back?
I was supposed to be there now, but the poly market suggests that I should leave before February.
Okay, I want to talk about that for a minute. So first of all, how long did you end up getting to stay?
Only 5 days.
Oh, okay, but okay, you still had a proper trip. But and then on the poly market thing, were people just like talking and raising concern, and then you just thought I should look at poly market to break the tie in my head, or did you kind of watch poly market all throughout and use that to make a decision?
I contributed. When the numbers started to inch up much higher beyond, I think it was like 10% in as of February, like as in the attack will commence no later than February 1. It just means that I should head out of town, at least make sure that I secure a flight, a reliable flight out of town, lest I get stuck in town.
What's underpinning that? Is it general geopolitical buzz around Iran and them being backed in a corner and poked and prodded, or is it
yeah.
a Hezbollah type thing?
Yeah, and it's Trump's declaration that he'll take action if they find that many protesters were killed, which they were. So there's a Abraham Lincoln Carrier Group is out there in the Middle East, and more saber rattling happening. So anyway, best to get out of town when missiles start falling. I can deal with snow. Missiles will be a bit more challenging.
Yeah, no. I can't question that rule of life. We're good. I'm out skiing with some cybersecurity industry folks actually, so it's pretty phenomenal, but easy enough to get on here and kick off. So jumping right into it, a topic that came up was something about Curl having to end their bug bounty program. I said having to end, choosing to end it. And the way that, and they wrote a post about this and Onward, and I read a bit about it to catch up to speed. And so the way that it was portrayed was, for one, they had curl, right, open source command line web browser, if you will. It's been around for ages. It's pretty venerated. For better or worse, a lot of code and tools will sometimes hook into it and use it to do web stuff in an automated fashion. But it's maintained and it's continuously updated. It's available on all platforms, and it is highly targeted because it's on a lot of endpoints out there. And if you could backdoor it or anything else like that, you get quick deployment and distribution. And when it goes out to the internet, it's not really weird because that's what curl does. So it's probably a little easier to get around behavioral controls if they existed. And so the maintainers said that they had to kill their bug bounty program, which was provided for free by HackerOne. They had to end it because they were getting all this AI slop in submissions.
Yeah.
And I'm in the middle of a number of bug bounty programs, and in a way, nothing's changed in that the organizations I have visibility into still get, including my own company, still get what we started calling beg bounties, which was low-hanging, nothing burger fruit that you could never fix in your life, and it would never have any security impact. And they're just kind of played up with like, hey, this seems like a pretty high severity thing. It'd be nice if you gave a reward. And you can tell they're just opportunistically doing that. it was kind of obvious to me that those have taken on a Gen AI because a Gen AI lens onto the actual phrasing of it, like the actual paragraphs and the way that they're structured. And what the Curl article is saying is that it seems to be AI generated scanning to find all this stuff and put it together. And I think they're saying they got 50 in the last 30 to 45 days. And that it's just consuming way too much time because they're kind of put on notice and they have to run these things to ground. And it finds out that it's just exaggerated over and over and over again. So they're just cutting it off. They're leaving the ability that always existed for people that don't have a financial motivation and are just altruistic to let them know if they find something. I started talking about this with a lot of the industry, and most people immediately react towards, oh, it's a shame to not incentivize researchers because this is so critical. And I agree, bug bounty is generally the highest fidelity way to get alerts in. So the things I'm curious about your thoughts on are, for one, does this really lessen their ability to find issues materially by getting rid of it here? Is the Gen AI slop problem real? Is there a way to counter that? And have you seen this like bug bounty revolution, if you will, kind of destroying the bug bounty world?
So having used bug bounty services for a while, I think there's a fundamental um, assumption that comes into the use of these services. And the assumption is that there's vetted researchers, of course, but also vetted
Correct.
findings. Okay.
Correct.
So the vetted findings piece is where I think some things are starting to fall down.
Yeah.
If the community or if the team is receiving bogus findings, right, unvetted findings, then that's just creating noise for obviously the team that has to deal with them. So that puts the pressure back on HackerOne, on BugCrowd, on the bug bounty offerers, if you will. But I think there's a broader play in motion, which is we should absolutely expect tons more submissions from AI, from people using AI. And the only way that we're going to really be able to handle the load, of course, is other AI tools to help us determine whether the findings are legit. Okay. But that has its own set of problems too, which we can certainly get into. There are a couple. One other thing I would point out, and I've mentioned this before in the prior podcasts, which is if bugs are dense, okay, if bugs are dense, hence security vulnerabilities will also be dense. That means there's essentially there's an endless number of these sort of findings, okay, and the more we look, the more we'll find. So, do we want to incentivize more looking at this stage? Will AI systems look on our behalf? Absolutely, they will. Do we want necessarily humans to look? They'll find more clever things. Perhaps they will. But we're going to find, the more we look, the more we find. And curl, just to make sure that people understand, is absolutely critical infrastructure. It's in probably, I don't know, easily 5-6 billion different things. Okay. Oh, I guess it's in pretty much every phone. So you count every person in the world who has a phone. That's your low floor. But then nearly every TV, nearly every car, nearly everything that talks to the web uses curl. So that's a significant number of assets that could be that need to be fixed if we find something potentially really, really bad in a project like curl. Which goes back to my original point. If we want to incentivize people to look for things that ultimately will cause a problem. If we, I'm not suggesting that we stick our heads in the sand and pretend there's no problem, but I do think that there is something to be said about slowing down the pace at which we find these problems. Because the more that we incentivize, the more that we point things to, we'll just keep finding more things.
At some point in my career, I think I was using curl more than I was using browsers. That's how important it was. I was, and that's no bullpucky. It's so useful. Somebody keep me honest. Maybe our esteemed colleague Tilson can look at this article, so you keep me honest when I say this. But I think the first thing that I thought about was what Sunil said was, typically when you hire these bounty programs,
Mhm.
there is like a first line of defense that you pay them. Now that might be an extra charge. I remember we paid that. Like I didn't want to look at every single one of these findings. I
Mm.
wanted them to look. I wanted the bounty programmers, the managers, to look at that first before they send it to us to validate whether it was legit, whether the person was legit, and whether the findings were legit. And some of them you cannot, right? You have to actually look more internally. But regardless of
Not
that,
generally.
you pay for the fee. Okay. And so I think when I read the article, I thought HackerOne was doing this at no cost for the service of hosting the bounty program, not the paying, but of the bounty, but rather of the hosting of the services. And so I'm assuming that as part of that freebie, that the Bug Bunny, I want to say HackerOne was the
That's
company
right.
that was doing the Bug Bunny program. Maybe they weren't getting paid for that. And so they were just passing it
Yeah.
on to the group that was doing curl, into open source. I think it's an open source
Yeah.
community. And I think what the open source community said was, "Oh, we get 50 of these in the last year. Somebody again, please keep me
Month.
honest." And they were just saying, "I'm foul. I can't handle it."
Yeah, I had
Go
the
ahead.
exact same questions about it. Right, it's called triage.
Yeah,
Not in the common noun sense, but like within the HackerOne parlance as well. And I agree. Like having run these programs a bunch, you don't get crap because, and you can go into the bug bounty. So now I'm gonna like pivot a little bit into like for listeners who aren't running a bug bounty or who are tentative about it. I don't want this story to put them off because instead we should use it as an opportunity to learn how it works. So people submit the stuff to the program. They have to be somewhat vetted and be in the program, and then they do triage it. You could log into the console, BugCrowd or HackerOne, and those are the ones I have experience with. There's others, and you can see ones that are newly submitted and have not been triaged. And if you want to like ride dirty, you can go in there and look at the kind of the nonsense and see. But generally, the first thing they do is go to a queue. When an employee of that company, HackerOne or BugCrowd, is looking at it, and they'll sometimes push back on the researcher. Hey, are you sure? That's not only like helpful, it's the only real value, not the only, but it's the main value of those platform providers. Because not only does it improve the signal noise ratio and make sure you're only getting stuff that's legit, but when something is dumb or antagonistic or borderline extortion, you have this buffer that is pushing back and it insulates you from potentially antagonizing the hacker. Like most companies' lawyers, if they got a random email that said, "Hey, we know a serious vulnerability and we can hack you," they'd be very uncomfortable with the SOC analyst being the one to reply to that.
yeah, yeah.
Right? Because what
So,
happens? It's
let me
like,
add,
oh,
let me add
that's
a couple of thoughts on that. And Jerry and Sunil, please keep me honest on this. And first of
we
all,
will.
I don't want to poo-poo on the fine people that support curl. God bless you. Thank you for all the work you've done for the community. It's been a tremendous effort, and thank you. So now I'm going to be a little critical here, but if you're getting a lot of these useless reports from bounty programs that you believe are being AI generated, wouldn't it be helpful to use AI tooling as well to review those findings and determine these issues or not? And so use AI now to also ferret out some of these things that are kind of just noise and worthless. So you can be more, you can be more productive. You can be more efficient. But it's easy to say this when these folks are doing it for free. So please don't let me poo-poo
Well,
on this.
so I was trying. If anyone out there knows Daniel Stenberg, he's the guy at Curl who wrote the blog on all this. And I was trying to get in touch with him or find someone who knew him because I wanted to ask, did you have no triage as part of the free deal? If he says, oh
Oh,
yeah, we didn't have triage. I'm like, oh no wonder. Yeah, I get it. At which point I might ping BugCrowd and say like, hey, if you want to go in there and make it free and add triage, you could kind of have a little nice headline here. But if they did have triage, this is really weird. So putting that aside, I'll tell you, even for companies that have a bug bounty program, you get stuff outside the program. You get these raw emails, and it always sets you up in that situation where you're like, and then they're persistent, right? They write you back a few days later. Hey, what about this? Aren't you going to do something about it? And if they figure out how to do it, they will ultimately write to, or if they're a vendor, even worse, they'll write to your COO and your CFO and your
yeah.
CEO and
Yep.
hey, your security team's ignoring me, and
Yep.
that's a bad place to be in as a security group. So like I actually have a customer that is in that situation, and I was just writing up like some ground rules to have a defensible and consistent policy for how people are treating it, because that's going to happen one day, and I wanted that team to be able to say like, here's why we didn't write them back, CEO. Chill out, we're not negligent about it. But the right way to handle that when you get them through and you have a bug bounty is to reroute them to the bug bounty program. And the bug bounty program, you can't just say like, "Hey, thanks, but go to HackerOne," because they're not invited to HackerOne, and then they'll say, "Well, you told me to go, and they won't let me in." You really just reach out independently to HackerOne, say, "We got this. Do you know this person?" They're often on the platform. I've had it where they say, "Oh yeah, that person's not in your program, but we know of them. They're a junior analyst. They don't have a lot of findings. They're not." Usually at that point, it's like, never mind, and professionally ignore it.
Yep.
But I do think that these programs, like, no one should take this as this isn't a valuable service, or that you don't need those middlemen, because I think a lot of times they're the ones who tell the potentially antagonistic person that you're stupid, go away, this is a joke. And that's not something
You
you want
will
to do as an
save a
enterprise.
ton of headaches and real cost to your organization and security, and maybe even other groups that get impacted with some of these solicitors. You will get your money multiplied by a number of times if you get a bug bounty program that's managing that for you. Because that's the
Mhm.
problem that I was experiencing, and many of us experience, is you have to reply back to these folks, and they're big bounties or whatever you want to call them, right? But it's the best thing to do is to say, go to my HackerOne. Here's the policy. As long as you fit in, do that. And if they don't do that, I don't want any business with you. I don't want to even talk to you. If
Oh
you hit
yeah.
my CEO, my CFO, or my GC, I'm going to let them know we have a policy that we agreed. That's where they should go, and they don't want to do that. End of story.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so let me frame what my experience with Bug Bunny as well. HackerOne is generally they cater more to the researchers.
Hmm.
Bug
Which they
Crowd,
call hackers. In
um,
that platform, they call them hackers.
sure, I'll call them researchers, but Bug Crowd tends to cater actually more to the company that is leveraging the service. And what I mean by that is that triage is almost like I don't think you have an option except to use triage. You have to. It's part of the core service, and they favor the company more so than the researcher in terms of any sort of disputes and whatnot. That's been my experience, but
Same
your
exact experience.
mileage may vary. The
Yep.
other consideration is I'm a strong proponent of Bug Bounty, but I was trying to explain what I think is the limits of what Bug Bounty can do for us. I think Bug Bounty is great when you first start a program and you've created a new application, and you really just need some people, some set of people to be motivated to just find the obvious stupid stuff that should be cleaned up. Okay, wonderful for that. But if it requires like really in-depth research and lots of effort, the question is, do we really need to incentivize people to go to that level? Okay. And if the answer is yes, because the stakes are higher, then sure, you should you can potentially have a bug bounty program that raises the stakes. But as you continue to raise the stakes, you just create more and more incentive for people to actually go and start looking. And this is where my comment about if bugs are dense, there's always something to find. And in some cases, if my bounty is only $500, okay, I don't necessarily need for you to go. You're not going to be incentivized to look for it. Well, an attacker who wants to compromise 5 billion devices in the world or more, would they be motivated? I'm sure they could be, but you know, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a whole bunch of, well, I know there's a bunch of researchers out there that are looking for that kind of stuff. But they will find that anyway, even if you didn't have a bug bounty. That's kind of my point. They will still find it anyway. Okay. Your bug bounty is not going to necessarily, you'll create more problems that need to be fixed that wouldn't have been discovered otherwise. While the people who are trying to discover these will find them anyway.
I don't know. I think it depends on the service, but like I think the missing element here that I harp on all the time that I think most CISOs and CISO organizations fall short on is having a strictly defined rubric for grading risks in general. And that's like, you could directly, project that metaphor onto the bug bounty program in that the levels and triage, right? So like a typical program today would be $100 for finding low-hanging fruit crap that isn't really a big deal, but it's legit. And let's say $5,000 for finding something that, thank you, I'm so glad you found it. If the bad guys found it, it would have been really bad tonight. And you can if you're doing that and you keep throwing $100 here and there, and they're all kind of dumb, you could just take that level and change it from 100 to 0. We won't pay you. Right? You can just keep on moving the line wherever you want to eliminate the noise.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only argument should be about where to draw the line. But it's and like Microsoft and OpenAI and probably even Starbucks these days, they've just moved that up so high that that top tier is 6 figures or 7 figures all the time now if you find something like that. But I don't think that altruistic researchers would find this stuff without the bounty. And if you had a threat profile with a really sophisticated adversary, you also have the element that like the general hive mind's not motivated enough to find it, but some state-sponsored actor is. And so by the time that you find out about it, it'll be too late unless you tell people to go out of their way. We'll give you $5,000 or $50,000 or whatever it is to put on your state-sponsored threat actor hat and see if you can construct a kill chain that would matter.
But
So
I'm trying to find
necessary.
out. Yeah, let me try to. Sorry to interrupt, but let me try to understand Sunil's argument here. Right, hang on a minute, right? So your argument is, one of your arguments is that if you invite people to go find vulnerabilities, well, guess what? Depending on how dense those vulnerabilities are, they're going to keep finding it, and they're going to always find vulnerabilities, and that's just the nature of life in technology. Is that correct? That's one point, correct? I'm hearing. Am I paraphrasing your statement?
It's with the assumption that bugs are dense, and that
Okay.
that is the core assumption, right?
That's right. No, I did say dense, right? They have to be dense, okay? And so, so you're saying, look, people that are going to be researchers, they're going to find it sooner or later, whether there's a bug bounty program or not, because why they want to be recognized in the industry, whatever the reason, right? Maybe they're nefarious reasons, but whatever, they're going to do it. Is your point? But I still go back to the triaging. If these services are all they do is triaging for a company, and they charge you $50,000, $70,000, whatever that money is, or 25, 40, whatever the going rate is nowadays for a small bounty program, okay? Not the Microsoft one. That in itself is worth all the dime. I mean, because you don't have, I don't know if that's a legitimate researcher who's emailing me. I don't know if that's the right Sunil, you on the other end. I want to have a company that's going to be able to do, figure out if that's really you, Sunil, reporting that bug bounty program. And that to me is valuable.
I think having a validated set of researchers is nice. At your beck and call or disposal, if you wanted to have, when you build something new and you want to have a group of people who've been vetted to just bang away at it to find stupid, that's a great service. It's really more just a question, and that finds, again, a subset of the really dense bugs that we have whenever we write any kind of code. The real question is fundamentally, at what stage do we no longer want to incentivize people to keep looking?
I think it's just a pyramid, and it goes back to my rubric and all that stuff I keep saying. Right, so it's a pyramid, and after I come up for air, Sunil, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the intentional usage of the term dense versus like voluminous, because dense to me is indicates a ratio, like a lot in a per unit, and to me, like there's a lot dense but maybe more voluminous bugs at a low level, at like a P5 or a low or an info, or depending on your scheme.
But there's a code aspect to this, right, Jerry? I mean, Sunil, when he's talking dense, there's a lot of code there, a lot of lines of code, but it also could be wide. It's a lot of different complex systems involved in the entire
I just mean that
ecosystem.
There's a bunch of low-hanging stuff, and you'll always keep on finding them. And if you don't care about them, it is stupid to keep on asking people to find them for you. But at the oh man, this is somebody. If the wrong person had found this, we would be lose a lot of money or be out of business or disclose a bunch of sensitive customer data. Um, those aren't dense, right? And I think that you do have to incentivize people to find them, and it's worth it to keep on going. And you will find them if you don't have a bug bounty program. Like people say, it's not if but when you get hacked. It's more like it's not if but when there will be a way to hack you. And if you use a bug bounty, you might come out of that a lot cleaner.
Let me also offer one other perspective or two other perspectives that have come up recently. It's similar in the nature of curl. So a couple of months ago, the maintainers of libxml2 basically said, I'm not going to take any more. This was actually driven not by AI slop, but by, well, wasn't slop, but rather by Project Zero, Google's Project Zero, using AI tools to find legit bugs in libxml, legit issues. So this is not slop. This is like, you got a real issue.
Legitimate.
Yeah. But it was done through AI, right? So just the volume increased. So this is not a slop issue. This is just pure volume issue. And the maintainer said, look, we can't handle the volume. And if folks like Project Zero from Google are going to point their cannon at us, then we open source maintainers just can't. We don't have time and energy to go and fix all these things. So what we're going to do now is, if you report a bug to us, it has no embargo. We will make it public for anyone to see immediately. Okay. Even before there's a patch. Okay, so now let me go back to my earlier assertion. If bugs are dense and we're going to find tons of these things, is that actually a good thing for us to just point out all these bugs everywhere, which are not going to be patched? Okay, or like for any time in the near future.
This is one of those situations where you may need organizations, the big name organizations. Hey, they've done something in the past. Obviously, they don't do it for everybody. But if Google's going to do this, and it's going to impact some of these small maintainers or people that don't have enough maintainers or any maintainer, then there should also be, because there's an externality component, doesn't it? I mean, open source is sort of an externality in some ways, because we're all benefiting from it, but the cost of fixing it and doing that, there's an actual cost. And we'll benefit from these codes being fixed. I think the big corporations should put in some funds to help pay for those bounties.
So we do some of that through the Linux Foundation.
Neil? What is that?
The Linux, it's done through the Linux Foundation. I forget the specific open source component to it, but generally speaking, it's done through the the Linux Foundation. But the Linux Foundation has its own sort of issues, and I think there's like an open source security again, there's a specific thing that they have for that. But I think the general perspective from the maintainers is it's not enough, and it's not just throwing money at the problem. It's really actually people, right? They need help from real people who can get the results and figure out how to integrate the fixes into the code. So this gets into the second piece I was going to point out. There are a number of cases where people put in legitimate issues, bugs that they find into open source, into the as a pull request into the code repo.
Yeah.
And they're upset because the people who are putting in the pull requests don't get them merged into the code base. And the maintainers are like, look, dude, you don't understand the bigger architecture of what we're trying to fix, what you're trying to fix here. You fix this, and it's going to create 40 other issues. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it requires this really deep understanding of how this entire system is built. And when we have these AI tools come in and find this very shallow sort of thing and offer a really shallow fix, that's actually not helping the problem. And this is the complaint of many open source maintainers who, of course, understand deeply their code base, and are trying to deal with the fixes that people offer, and they're thankful for them, but they really need people who are willing to go really deep into that code base. And what we see with the AI scanning tools isn't doing that. It's just giving you these surface, shallow fixes, whether bug fixes or security fixes. And the maintainers are like, this doesn't help. We need people who really understand this at a much deeper architectural level.
Well, moving on to the next topic here, the state of security for AI, as we're calling it here. I went on some like kind of diatribe about, well, exactly that, and my beliefs at this point are that there's such intensity around companies getting on board with AI. And maybe this is a bit speculative, but I like to say that the people currently investing are, whether we work in venture or even private equity, especially private equity, a lot of them felt like they missed the boat with the internet boom, right? They were all doing business during the internet boom. And then a subset of those feel like they missed the boat in the cloud revolution. Although, whether or not that was really, directly profitable, more as enabling scale, I guess. But nonetheless, all that to say, I think a lot of people today are like, we're not going to miss this one.
There's a lot of
people are
FOMO.
just jumping.
There's a lot of FOMO going on. It's real.
Yeah. And I think as a security leader, it's kind of like, the way I wrote it up was like in the lobby on the way back from the board meeting, they might be like, oh yeah, by the way, are you securing that? But it's not driving the main narrative, which is, the metrics people are producing for governance and for board meetings include AI adoption. Like, because the narrative down is like, hey, I keep hearing all these companies are using AI and do all kinds of stuff. We have 5,000, 50,000, however many employees here. We pay them a lot of money. I bet if they were all using AI, we might need less of them, but we could certainly do some amazing, innovative things here. Are we doing that? Are we doing that? And then that goes, gets distributed down into the rank and file us. Here's some more AI tools. Why aren't you using more AI tools? If there's anything in your way preventing you from using AI, let me know and we'll get it out of the way for you. And that's about where we are. So I think like security wise, the market is just anything someone can deploy to say they're not asleep at the wheel, like they're doing something. But I don't feel like there's a huge definition of what people are worried about that would steer which tools they want to buy and what will be effective. And before everybody out there that's like, well, what do you mean? It's obvious we don't want people sharing sensitive data to OpenAI. Yeah, do you really care? I mean, by the time that data, you sharing something to OpenAI, the only time that's ever come out in the news, and there's one this week about the CISA chief supposedly sharing something sensitive data over OpenAI, that stuff only comes out because of internal whistleblowing or alerts.
Yeah.
Like, it's not because it gets leaked to Twitter and everyone's reading the data. It's just, hey, I accidentally overshared, and then it becomes a story after an incident. In reality, there's no damage happening from sharing things to OpenAI. There's no damage happening from oversharing to Claude.
Let me make 2 points on this one.
Go for
it. Because Sunil's is going to have a deeper point on this. I'm just going to go very shallow, because very shallow here. Code. I have this, I like regularly have these discussions with our CEO when he's putting presentations about what we're selling, and he's presenting to his to CIOs and to CEOs of other companies, and my issue is, it's like a freaking somebody like using their nails to scratch a blackboard, is he uses AI as a verb. AI is the verb. It's AI. We're going to make AI. We're going to deploy AI. We're going to give your teams AI capabilities. What the fudge is that? What is that? I mean, to me, I'm from the school of, what am I going to gain? How is my team going to be productive? What is the headache that I'm trying to solve? But what I'm seeing, and we're a little guilty of that, is we're just saying AI for the sake of AI. You know what I mean? Oh, it's AI. We're going to implement AI. We're going to have your team use AI. And people are buying it. Think about that. It's to me, it just feels really weird. Second, I'm now looking for new office because we've gotten bigger. That's a good thing. In the last 3 months, my agent told us that the commercial space in San Francisco is just crazy. And here's what she said, and this could be all bullpucky from an agent trying to get me all riled up. But she said,
Well, you're saying real estate people might possibly be, disingenuous?
Ooh.
It sounds like
Right?
cybersecurity marketers.
Yeah, exactly.
Where there's gambling going on in this building? What? um, she said that her researchers are now saying that San Francisco's real estate vacancy will drop from 30% to somewhere in the low 20s, mid 20s by the end of the year. Think about that. That's crazy. That is what's happening with all these VCs, bringing it back to what Jerry said and the FOMO. They are throwing cash at all these little AI companies because they don't want to miss the boat. And now that's increasing. It's making real estate harder in San Francisco. Think about it, folks. San Francisco is one of the most depressed commercial spaces in the country since COVID. And now it's improving like crazy. Anyway, that was
Right.
my 2 cents. So, Neil, please go deeper.
Well, to the FOMO point, I think part of the reason why there's a greater degree of FOMO for AI is because there is this illusion that we have that we have a better understanding of what its capabilities are. And might have said this before on the podcast, but we oftentimes confuse performance for competency. So we see these highly performant things, but we assume that it has competency across a wide range of capabilities or a wide range of needs, but it actually doesn't. Furthermore, when it comes to like cloud, I mentioned earlier, I would say many execs really didn't understand what the real potential is of cloud when it first came out. There were a few who understood it and dived head first. But I think with AI systems, people can have big imaginations of what it can potentially do because it's so relatable. They can interact with it in a way that seems very natural, and it does answer. Yeah, sure, it hallucinates things here and there, but for the most part, the initial experience of using LLMs or ChatGPT, it blew a lot of people's minds, and they extended. Again, it was highly performant, but at the same time, we started to extend its competency across a much wider range of things than it probably should have. So I think that's really what's driving the much greater push towards a technology that people seem to understand much better than cloud. And if you were to go back to 1996, 97, around the internet, I think people were still just trying to understand what the internet was back then. But today, I mean, but if something like AI came out back then, I think people have instantly understood the potential of it because it was so relatable.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about this a lot too, like until like software developers, there's this notion of steak versus sizzle, right? I think that's Kyle Davis talking about like, curb appeal versus actually having some bones there. And like front end versus back end development, like a full stack developer will be working on a project and they'll have done amazing work for months on the back end and data pipelining and the architecture and the whole APIs up and all that. And then, they feel, I mean, and they rightfully feel like they've accomplished so much, and then they're talking about it with senior leadership of some sort, or customers, or investors, or anything else, and no one really groks it. They're like, okay, yeah. And if they do the opposite, which is just do the UI, but it doesn't work at all, which is takes probably a quarter of that time or less, they get hoisted on a chair and paraded around and celebrated, and the champagne's flowing, all that. And like, imagine trying to pitch investors with all the back end already done versus with the front end done, but nothing behind it. Like the latter is the correct way to do it because everyone gets clarity. Like they can immediately understand what you're trying to do. And you're right. Like with AI, it's very easy, and it happened all day, every day, to say like, wow, here's a very specific to you case study about organizing your day or booking a flight. Versus with cloud, it was like, what does that do for me?
Right. And actually, I think that's why we're seeing Claudebot, Moltbot, OpenClaw, whatever the new word is going to be tomorrow, being so widely adopted. People just intuitively understand what a personal AI assistant can do for you. And the massively rapid adoption that we're seeing of OpenClaw is really just a testament to you demonstrate a use case that people just understand, and they're more than willing to throw all their data, personal data, and access to it, with the consequences that obviously emerge from a security standpoint. And we clearly are saying security issues that emerge from it, but the fact is that the use case of a personal AI assistant that is very capable draws huge interest because people intuitively understand what they believe it can do for them.
Yeah, that only makes sense. And by the way, when that news broke of assistants being taken up, someone was giving advice on how to defend them, and they mentioned using Cloudflare tunnels so that you can avoid having like direct inbound internet access. And the investment community grabbed hold of that. And Cloudflare was trading at like $170 in that range. And today they're trading at $170 that range. But in the past week, right after that news broke, they were at like 205, 210. And all of the analysts and everyone was trying to figure out what that meant. And then ultimately they concluded, oh, that's great, but it's just free services. It's not going to drive any revenue to them. Yeah. So people are paying attention to that.
I think
So,
one of the key takeaways of what I am pointing out with something like CloudBot is you have people who are willing to. I don't know if they even see it as a risk. Frankly, they just see it as all upside, right? They'll eventually hear the downside, but I think the interesting perspective is even with some people understanding the downside, they're willing to take the risk to grant these systems. And by the way, I should mention these are local. I think one of the things that really drew a lot of interest was, and it was in theory, meant to be run completely locally, and not be exposed. Okay, people are obviously making stupid mistakes that makes it exposed. But the attraction of a non-SaaS offering is huge. Okay, and I think that's actually a really interesting consideration, because there's also this overall market movement around the souring of SaaS services, the souring of the SaaS market itself as a viable business, especially in light of what these AI tools can do, and what we can create for ourselves. If we want to create a CRM tool, why not just vibe code it? Why do I need Salesforce, right? There are reasons why you need something like Salesforce, but at the end of the day, we're starting to see more and more people offload.
You're seeing that, Sunil? You're actually seeing that?
I've done my own for exactly those reasons. But I'm just saying that CloudBot is there are two facets of it that really drove the adoption. One, the understanding of what it can do. It's a personal AI bot, and two, this perspective that it's run locally.
Huh, that's really interesting. I never, but I mean, do you think people like the fact it's run locally, or do you think it's like the fact they're not paying a SaaS subscription fee? Is it just about the money?
I don't know if it's just, well, they went, well, the part of the joke, if you want to buy Cloudflare stock, that's one thing. But the joke is that there's a ton of people buying Mac Minis because Peter, the guy who came up with it, he said, hey, I'm running this on a Mac Mini. I made it really easy to run on Mac Mini. And so guess what?
Wow.
You get a whole bunch of people buying Mac Minis.
Yeah. That's wild. Yeah, I just was talking to some people out here yesterday, and they were talking about they were working with a startup that was going to do message archiving for SMS texts that are not on a corporate device, and they had like the magic solution, and they could do this. Like you could get employees' personal text messages to be supervised, right? And so you could detect if there's some about insider trading or whatever. And the way that market works is that generally the compliance departments would rather, they just want to have plausible deniability. Like, yeah, I'm meeting the letter of the law, and if something actually happens with insider trading, they miss it. As long as they can prove that they weren't negligent, that's good enough. So when a technological solution comes out that might, raise the bar on what companies can do, they're like, maybe I have to buy this or I'm going to be negligent. And it turned out the technology, the way that it was monitoring, recording all these users' individual messages, is they just had these farms of Mac Minis. And they were basically like, it's just like if you want to join your phone with your Mac and enable it to see messages on your Mac, that's basically what they were doing in mass. And Now some Mac Mini in a closet was your computer that was able to get copies of your messages, and then that was going on through hopefully some kind of secure triage and whatnot. So yeah, that's a thing.
Well,
All right.
I'm sure we'll hear more about the CloudBot, Mac Mult, and Multbot, well, OpenClaw, whatever it's called now. Um, and if um, it, it's one of those things that I think we security people should actually experiment with, warts and all, especially because of its warts, right? There is a way to configure it more securely, but even with those secure configurations, there are still many potential considerations for how it can be, how it can compromise you. But yeah, experiment anyway. Experiment with throwaway emails. Experiment with a throwaway computer. That is why people bought Mac Minis to do this. And I would say if you really want to understand like where things are heading very fast, go play around with it and see what it can do. And I think it will blow your mind, but it also make you very concerned about what the future holds from a security standpoint as well.
Thanks.
Well, I need a drink after that, and I don't even drink alcohol.
Well, another thing that caught I think it was my eye in particular. There was a letter, a transmission that came out from the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve about in supervision and reg in particular that came out towards the tail of October that was concise for a communication from the Board of Governors, which still means it was X pages long. But it basically said, like, chill out on the examinations. Okay. Super TLDR when I say that, and now I'll rewind it and go in a little more detail. Having lived through a lot of the examinations from the Federal Reserve, I know that it could really create a lot of dysfunction and paralysis in organizations and put them in a state where they can't even really deploy, and they're disincentivized to deploy security solutions because they're going to get second guessed and triple guessed with the lines of defense and all that. And so this communication came out, and I mean, I think this is a part of, and the way I wanted to kind of opine on it and get your points on it is, this is kind of a Doge-ish thing. Like, this was kind of like the administration saying less regulation, right? So that's and maybe that's always bad, maybe that's always great. The reality is probably somewhere in the middle. I think this net felt great. So being under regulation and the burden of it for many years, particularly from the Fed, I would say that a lot of what was in here, like, for example, this is saying if internal audit thinks an MRA, which would be a finding from the Fed, has now been closed, that's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be, oh, okay, what does the risk group think? Okay. What does the internal audit group? Okay. Now let's see what we think. So that's big. And then it's also saying that once something is fixed, like MRAs would be things like you don't have a good vulnerability management program, something like that. And I'm using that example because I think that's kind of a stupid, invalid finding in general anyway, but something that broad. And then the company would have to build one, and then they would submit it to the second line, which would be the risk group, and maybe they'd push back, and then they have to change things again. And finally, they'd approve, and then they'd go to the internal audit, and the same thing would happen again. And finally, when they approve, they go back to the Fed and say, okay, we fixed what you told us to. It only took us 18 months, right? Because it takes that long to do stuff like that. What do you think? And then the whole thing would start with the Fed, and there. And now it's saying, like, internal audit says it's good, great. And also that you can't hold something open and say, and this is what used to happen all the time, like, okay, you've designed a new program, but before we close out the MRA, we need to make sure it operates for 6 months just to make sure it's sustainable. And it was just ridiculous, right? And imagine the turnover you have during that time. And plus, you're working on a problem now from 2 years ago that's probably irrelevant technologically. So it's saying you can't do that either. You can't leave something open just waiting to see if it's sustainable. It's done. It's done. You just open a new finding if there's a problem next time. I think that's pretty commonsensical. It felt to me like whoever wrote this didn't say, like, oh, I don't understand what the hell that does, but it must be stupid. Let's just shut it all off. But this was someone who had lived in it, I feel like, and gone through this and really cherry pick specific things that and like even just deficiencies that are whether or not they have a material impact on the firm's financial condition and like raising the bar and all this stuff. What do you guys feel like this is a positive example of streamlining regulation? Do you feel like this kind of knife applied to other non-cyber regs could be harmful? Does this give you concern, or are you celebrating?
So first of all, for the audience, let's make sure we know what MRA stands for.
Yeah,
MRA
thank
stands
you.
for
Thank you.
Memorandum Requiring Attention. There's a more severe version of it, which is MRIA, Memorandum Requiring Immediate Attention. And it was just the notion of a greater degree of severity. And I remember being at Bank of America, like, having, if you wanted budget for something, tie it to an MRA and like instant budget, right? You know exactly, there'll be budget for it because it's this externally driven mandate that you must address. So I think to Jerry's point, I think it's actually a good move, but it's reflective of a broader sort of assumption that's happening. And the broader assumption is that corporate governance is working well on its own, that there's a structure in place to ensure that that there's good corporate governance, good identification of risk and dealing with the risk. And that's happening within the corporation well enough that regulators just need to occasionally just check in, make sure things are going, but don't need to provide this level of continuous scrutiny because you expect the board of directors and the governance structures to take care of it. I mean, let's just be clear. Just the fact getting an MRA is bad, okay? That puts everyone on attention, and that's usually enough to get everyone to align. All the stuff in terms of how long it takes to terminate and 6 months after that, I agree that a lot of that can go away because for the most part, once you get an MRA, there's sufficient attention paid to the issue that it will get fixed.
But yeah, like I think also for the layperson, and thanks for defining it, MRAs are why the TPRM market exists, and it's why questionnaires happen.
That's right.
That's what sucks about it. And so, I mean, it's true. The Fed themselves got on this war horse about third-party risk 15 years ago. And the way everything was so slow, it got codified into some examination guides. And then it was MRA, you don't have a adequate review program for vendors and third-party risk. At that point, like they're on notice. And then the budget is cut. They're not even going to talk back to the Fed about this for 6 months. And when they do, it'll be like, yeah, it's underway. We're working on it. We'll check back in you another 6 months. And then when somebody walks in the middle of that and it's like, hey, questionnaires is really stupid, we shouldn't do it. The executives are like, who are you? How did you get in the room? We're working on an MRA here. We want to be able to tell the Fed, we don't give a damn about the efficacy. We don't even know what it means. We're just trying to close it out.
Yeah. Before we went and became a public company, the biggest word that I always like, that is my one and the fear one, right? You got to like deal with it, blah, blah. It's a breach, security data breach, right? Like, holy crap, this is the real deal. Let's and you always think about that. But once we went public, the security breach's younger sibling, or maybe older sibling, is MRA. I have never seen our executives move quicker when internal audits say, well, this might be an MRA. And we freaking set up calls at 11 o'clock at night. I'm no bullpucky.
Yeah.
Right? By the internal
For
audit.
nothing.
Now, we were kind of young. You're trying to put, young as in we were just recently in public. And, the internal audit team needs to learn a little bit more. It was a new team. They didn't understand a lot of the infrastructure and what, fortunately for us, it was a nothing burger. We were able to clarify it. We broke bread afterwards with the internal audit team because you don't want them on your wrong side, and we said let's work a little closer together so we avoid this unnecessary drama. But again, to your point, both of your point, I have never seen the executives move quicker. Like people on Zoom calls at 11 p.m. and I'm like, what is this freaking thing? What MRA? What is MRA? I've never heard of this thing. What the hell is this?
And not super productive. For cybersecurity
Yeah.
risk
Yeah.
as a whole. So I think any efforts to make it sane make a lot of sense. And to Neil's point about whether or not internal corporate governance is functional and working well, I mean, there are some situations where the incentives are just not aligned. Like, let's just take Mastodon. It's not even a company, but like, let's just use messaging writ large. You know, you don't need to issue them MRAs about um, availability and stuff. Internal governance is incentivized. They don't want platforms to be down, Twitter, whatever it may be, on and on. But they might say, well, when it comes to personal data being disclosed, the company's not incentivized to prevent that. Because if it happens, they can insure it. They can just hope it blows over. It doesn't really matter. And that's where the government steps in and says, well, we're going to impose a disproportionate burden if that happens to you. Like consent decrees, they could block them from doing business, certain jurisdictions from growing. It's very impactful. And that's why people are all on the phone at 11 o'clock at night, because they're being threatened with this. And they just want to do whatever it takes to make it go away. So I think internal governance is really great. We're at a state of maturity where it's very effective when the incentives are aligned. And we just will always need, and it's usually around privacy lately, something to say like, if this is not going to really hurt for the company, but as society, we don't want it to happen, then that's where reg comes in. But it still doesn't have to get out of control. They don't have to expect them to run it like a government program would, which is basically what was happening. Yeah. All right. On a related note, is it? There was this Reddit thing that I can't even use Reddit. I don't understand why it's famous, but it's really good when somebody cuts out one message for you and puts it in the slide. That's
Their
Reddit
cybersecurity
best.
stuff section is good, Jerry. I don't know. I mean, it's not bad. The cybersecurity section.
I don't know. Every time I go there, I'm just looking at ads and fake posts that are really ads, and I'm like, I thought people weren't into this, but anyway, it's famous, and Tilson ripped it out of there and put it on the slide, so it's really shining. But the topic was like, what's the most expensive security control you've seen that added zero security? Kind of like our move the needle topic, and maybe regulation is one of those. I certainly have some in that area. What comes to mind for you?
Let me take a stab, Sunil. Let me have this one. I got to do it. This is really this is horrible what I'm gonna say. I think it's important to have monitoring and alerting under the right conditions. It's really important. But people have gone all the way deep into collecting logs forever and ever and ever and keeping them and retaining them. Just logs. And there are I'm going to badmouth some companies out there, Splunk, where security teams were spending millions and millions of dollars on things on Splunk because they were holding all these logs, all these data that they really were never going to look at. And honestly, after 2 years, what's the point? Okay, there are regulations. I get it. Yes, there are regulations that in certain industries, the ICE as an example, the exchange, the New York Stock Exchange, I get that. But outside of that, you don't need to maintain all those logs forever in perpetuity. So that's mine. Sorry, Sunil, I had to say it.
Well, retention requirements, it's worth noting, are not super explicit, and like there's litigators, like federal litigators who would disagree with that, and legislators who would, and they think they put in regulation and you have to store everything forever, but in reality, it's always worded just vaguely enough. It'll be like records of the company, and then you get into the debate like, was this a record of the company or not? So even when you take a requirement to hold on to data, and I'm speaking out of school here, thank God I don't have to be up to speed on all the regs today. But I think the SEC was 5 years for public company records. Make no mistake about it, if you take a selection of public companies, there's a massive disparity on what security data falls under those retention requirements. There are companies who have decided that means they need all their firewall logs for 5. And when those people go to another company, if they're in a subservient position, they will be like, really? We don't have to? Oh my God, that's so awesome. If they're brought in as someone in the executive team, they'll just ruin the next org because they'll bring that emotional baggage on with them. So when you go company to company to company, it's and the only correct answer is to be intentional and deliberate and documented about the approach, right? And memorialize that we're not holding on to firewall logs for more than And what I always like to say was like more than is operationally beneficial. There is an operational window where it's helpful, but you want to be able to say like, oh, after this isn't helpful to troubleshooting, the signal noise ratio is actually making it even harder because the Splunk has fallen over. We're just going to delete them. And you want to have air cover to do that without having to talk to the lawyers, because the lawyers are going to say, no, keep everything forever. Like,
That's right.
because there's no way I'm going to get fired. And that just doesn't really work. So there is no consistency on that. Now, if you felt pain about the retention requirements when it trickles down to security, it's not because that's what the reg says. It's because that's how the organization had interpreted it. So I think there's other ways to do that. With that in mind, like expensive security control, the ones I always think of are things that were interpretations of reg and audit guidelines, like segregation of duties. And Big Four would come in for 20 years, and all the findings that would come out of a SOC 2 or like an IT general controls exam for a public company. I'm just thinking of the things that most people have experienced. Most of the findings that come out of that are like segregation of duties. Did developers have access to production? I remember fighting about DBAs because they reported to the CTO, then they shouldn't have production access because that's a segregation duties issue. And the solution was to make them report to someone in operations. That's the kind of crap that's going on. So I feel like those controls, if you will, or requirements or framework guidelines were very expensive, even though you didn't buy them from a vendor, and provided zero upside security-wise.
There's a lot to unpack here. Let me first address some of the things that Mario first said. Okay, so when it comes to logging, first of all, let's just be clear that logging is after the fact. So if you're talking about zero security, as in it's preventative, by definition, it's not. Okay.
That's right.
But that said, I always find remarkable that after a breach, you bring in you could bring in Mandiant, and somehow and there's never, I don't think they've ever run into a case where they're like, oh, we have all the logs we ever possibly needed to do the entire forensic investigation, right? They always find like huge gaps. In many cases, they haven't even been logging at all. And yet they're able to do this amazing forensic analysis of what happened. Okay. So I find that to be interesting as just as a data point. I'm sure, no doubt, that they run into deep holes where they're like, okay, we don't know exactly how that got in. There's some like Russians breaking into Microsoft where that's still the case, but they have some suspicions, and I think that's just noteworthy that it's a rare case that happens. I want to also point out for historical purposes, we've seen this play out in larger scale. There was a massive NSA program called Trailblazer. You can find it on. I can share I can share it because it's on Wikipedia. But there was this program called Trailblazer that was trying to suck up a lot more data than it needed, and there were concerns that it was just way too expensive and it didn't need to capture all that data. There was a competing program called ThinThread that really was much more selective. And there were people who were saying, look, this Trailblazer is a whole bunch of fraud, waste, and abuse just because it's sucking up more than we need and it's violating people's privacy and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so what's interesting is that I think the general consensus was, yes, that's correct. It was a bunch of fraud, waste, and abuse, and collecting all the data wasn't necessary. We could have done it with something much slimmer. And because we collected so much, it was actually hard to find the actual needle in the haystack of needles. So in that regard, I agree with Mario's point that it wasn't just that it didn't add security, it was actually made things worse. Okay. So then on that front, there is the one security control that I would point to that has so far added zero security and potentially has made things worse are access reviews. Okay. Mm-hmm. And access reviews done, but at the same time, done correctly, there is some value, but the way that it's done across most organizations we've seen, let me actually prove how the value, how I can make an assertion that it added zero security value.
You got to give me the zero, but then you got to give me the goodness too. What would be a goodness? All right, please. This is cool. This is juicy.
On the goodness side, it's easy. If you have a system owner who actually is reviewing who has access on a periodic basis for, like who are the admins on a particular system, and just checks to make sure that they're still relevant. I think that's a great thing to do.
So you're okay with that? So people with elevated privilege on a system that's you got to protect, if they're not using it, get rid. Like don't have access.
And done by the system owner, yes.
Oh, so it has to be the system owner. Okay, got it.
I think
That's
the
your
manager doing
connection.
it is practically useless.
That's your point. Got it.
Okay.
Okay, good.
And as a testimony to that, we ran an experiment one time. The experiment was this, and I actually strongly encourage you guys all to try this as well. Okay. Create an entitlement or a privilege of some sort, assign it to everyone. Okay. And don't obviously it has no don't actually, it doesn't give you any actual privileges, but the name of the privilege is you must remove this entitlement. You must remove this privilege. Okay. This is a test to see if you are actually paying attention. If you do not remove this, you fail the test. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Do something like that. Put that into put that in and see how many people actually remove it.
Approved.
Select all, approve.
Interesting.
Done.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Interesting.
Zero security.
Right. So give me the bad
funny,
one.
like
That sounds good. Give me the bad one.
that's not good. That's a waste of time.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Give me the one that wastes time in other ways, right? You're thinking overall, you gave me a good example. Administrators, the operators review it, great. And now you're saying everything else outside of that is bad then.
Well, the access reviews as they stand today are just meaningless for the most part because the manager really doesn't understand what the access is.
I see.
Yeah, the person manager, the people manager.
I see. They're too far away from the actual day-to-day to know what the heck is going on.
No. Sometimes it's just obscure. Like the description. I mean, even if I knew what system it was and I know what type of system it is, I don't really know if this person is supposed to have access or not because they may be on some project that I'm not aware of. And this is especially the case with knowledge workers. If you have line workers, it's a bit more cut and dry. Like, this person's only supposed to do this function. What is this other thing that gives them access to this other system that seems out of place? Okay, that's fine. But generally speaking, the system owner should flag that first, right? It's not the manager's maybe the last line of defense for that, but it's practically a useless last line as well. And it
let me
so much
try
time.
to add this. I don't know if this is connected to access. It is access. I don't know access control, but we had reduced the number of people with let's just say root access to the cloud. Our AWS deployment. Okay. So this is a long time ago. And at one point, unfortunately, in your startup, everybody and their grandmother who's an engineer had access. And then you start tying it as you move on because you're growing up. You're saying, hey, man, I got real customer data here. We can't do that. So anyway, we started removing the people that had access. But then there was a few that were kind of just, as you get, tighter and tighter in the numbers, we would then implement this whole 60-day. Every 60 days, if you're not accessing, we have to remove it, right? Once you become the public part of things, when you become a public company, all this weirdness appears that I don't think is based in reality. But I think to Jerry's point, somebody learned this before, and now they're bringing their stink on our company. Okay, stay with me on this. So, okay, now it's 60 days. If you didn't access it, we review it, we take away your access. We started noticing a trend that 45 days, 50 days into that 60 days, we would see these folks who never accessed their environment. They would go in there and access it 45, 60 days, 50 days before the 60-day deadline. Do you know why they did that?
Reset the clock.
Reset the clock and reset the password. Because our password expires every 60 days. You would have to change it or mature. So it was to reset the clock, but they were resetting the clock by resetting their passwords on those systems. In those days, we didn't use Okta, okay? It wasn't Okta. We didn't have it was a centralized or an AD or anything like that. But I think what Sunil is highlighting is really important. I'm just using that story maybe to highlight this whole access reviews.
Well, so Sunil with the access reviews and me with segregation duties, like we both picked on like audit types, but the question was around like tools that provide zero value. Do any of those specifically, like technological tools, stand out to you that were a waste of money too? Any of that, it could be a vendor, I don't care, but it could also be a class.
Well, actually, on that, this one's hard because technological blaming the technology when you don't properly fund the people and process side of it is short shrifting the technology and what the technology is capable of doing. If you're talking about a technology that was just purely a waste of money and didn't, and everyone just complains about it, a company that starts with the word dark and ends with the word trace comes to mind. But generally speaking, I think the perspective I would offer is no technology in itself is bad. But if you don't fund the right people and the processes to incorporate that technology into your environment, all your technology is going to be a waste.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
What's yours, Gary?
Oh man,
you're not going to get away from this. You better put it out there.
Oh,
brother.
I know it. I got it. This actually combines the audit side with the technology, and it has to do with database access, right? We used to call it, I forget what the industry term is, but we call it a DAM, delete, add, modify, when it comes to write some databases. And it was this notion of reviews, right? That database queries were going to be reviewed for potential security implications. And that it's just like firewall log reviews, right? I mean, I think it's in SOC 2 still to this day. There's a control in there about reviewing firewall logs. No one's ever reviewed firewall logs on the planet. Like if you're not in firewalls and don't work in them, and you have any way of influencing reg, you need to know that and like leave this podcast. Like, oh crap, that was stupid. Like you can't literally read firewall logs and provide any value. If something suspicious happens, then you may consult them and use them to troubleshoot, sure. But there's no such thing as just reading the logs. You either allow things, yay, or you denied them, nothing, go back to bed. We block things all the time. The same was true on the databases. We used to get hit all the time about having to monitor the queries that are going onto the database. And so we bought tools like IBM Guardium. I was talking to somebody who sold IBM Guardium back in the day, and they were laughing like, yeah, we knew like that we were just selling it off of reg all the time and audit. It didn't really do anything. I used something called DB Networks. That was a startup, really awesome, cool team to try to get some more behavioral analysis around those. Cause I was bought in, like, we're never just going to read the SQL queries, but maybe we can like do behavioral patterning. And like, if somebody's working on different tables than they normally do, or a process is querying at hours that it normally wouldn't, or volume, but that never really, there were never any alerts that came out of there that had any value for security. Right. I mean, it makes sense. By the time someone breaks in and they're doing all this stuff, and then they're going to pull a lot of data out of it, they're using an app account that already has that right, or just monitoring the logs just doesn't do much. So I'd say database security monitoring.
But that's a little bit of that. Again, another related cousin is a WAF in the public internet in front of some database, right?
What we're like for protecting against SQL injection.
No, I thought a WAF actually was a pretty good investment to provide a broad set of controls. I would definitely not turn on all the rules, but I think the perspective of a WAF was it bought you time to deal with routine. Well, I mean, it bought you time, right? So let's take Log4j. It bought you time to try to fix some of the underlying issues with Log4j against the broad brush type of attacks that people see with Log4j. Are there ways to bypass the rules on WAF? Absolutely, no question about that. But it definitely cleaned up a lot of the low level noise that comes in, and just again, it buys you time to fix things behind the WAF. I think compared to, let's say, DBAM or database activity monitoring. That one definitely is a net negative because it found essentially nothing and destabilized databases and created operational downtime.
If for our audiences, if there's one technology that Sunil and I are going to be always in disagreements on, it's going to be WAF. I had to administer WAF at one point in my life, and I just kept trimming and trimming and trimming all those alerts, all those rules, that by the end, what the fudge did I have? Really nothing, right? I mean, so
that's normal.
Well,
You know,
hold on.
I appreciate your
let me
position,
offer.
Sunil. I just not, you know,
Let me
never
offer
see.
another,
Yeah.
and this, I'm sure this will be beneficial to Jerry, who holds a position on this. But I consider Cloudflare to be one of the biggest WAFs in the world right now,
Yeah.
Mm.
and it's
I'm
doing a
certain
pretty
of it.
good job.
Yeah, they did have some built-in stuff. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, like even just like anti-DDoS stuff that's in a CDN, like with Cloudflare is technically a WAF, but even within like their branded WAF solution in Cloudflare, Mario's bang on correct that there's like this, and he didn't say this explicitly, but there's a ton of rules in there, and a lot of them could do some damage. And I'll further say most companies have all of them disabled. And it's funny, Sunil said like I wouldn't recommend enabling all the rules. Well, I mean, yeah, if you don't want to have operational impact and back it out, sure. But for security benefit, I think the biggest problem right now is there are tons of like, if you took the Cloudflare WAF as a SKU customers and the amount of stuff that's active, it's got to be infinitesimal. Like everything is disabled. And I just know that because I felt that way. I always wanted to do more with WAF, and I knew there'd be some collateral damage. You have to regression test and onward. And so I started a company. We have one. It's web-based. It's SaaS. We have a WAF. So, you know, I'll be damned if I'm going to have everything disabled. So we keep a lot of stuff enabled, and it's a lot of work. You know, like, I mean, things change. You have different data sets that run through your app, and it triggers this stupid obscure WAF rule that was for
Wait.
Joomla CMS 10 years ago.
We used to call WAFs in our place. We are fudged, and I'm using the clean version of it. Okay.
It would just break everything. Well, so
Yes,
did firewalls.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
did load balancers and firewalls. Everybody hated them in ops.
Again, the way I would look at it is, in certain situations, it buys you time. And using Cloudflare as again a nice example, when there's a massive web vulnerability that is wide scale
True.
out there,
Yeah.
Cloudflare proactively turns on a
Yeah.
WAF rule to block 99 point. I mean, it blocks. It saves the internet.
Yeah,
you know?
no, I can do that.
And
But
that's
I'm
great.
still not into
I think
it.
that's a
I'm
wonderful.
not into it.
It's a wonderful control to have when you can operate it at that kind of scale, and for enterprises that have a lot of footprint, that kind of footprint, just for very selective sort of situations where you know that you need to buy that time. I think it's great.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the jury is still out on that, but I'm going to keep on fighting the good fight and trying to keep the dream alive on WAF. All right, guys, we've been blabbering on for about a bunch of these topics for a long time, and I'm looking forward to the next episode already, and we'll start collecting things about it. But in the interim, safe non-travels. So Neil, I think you're about to get hit with this winter storm anyway. So be safe at home, and I'm still looking forward to RSA and seeing you and any other listeners that want to sync up with us. Just say the word.